Alright everyone, I apologize profusely for the delay on this video. It's been a very long time coming, but I ran into some major snags on this project, and I'll get into what all those are. But first, here it is, the completed Atari 2600 PC. So just to recap, I have put a Dell Optiplex 390 inside here. So it is a Core i3 2.2 gigahertz dual core with 8 gigs of RAM, a 128 gigabyte SSD, just running on integrated graphics, nothing fancy, and it works really well. Just going over some of the quirks and features to quote Doug DeMuro on that, we have the power button over here. This is originally a toggle switch on the 2600, but I have moved one of the momentary switches that were over here to this spot because the power button is just that, a button, not a switch. So this will turn the computer on and off just like the shutdown or power button on a computer. I have two USB ports here. These are just USB 2.0 ports that are to the internal header in the motherboard. These two buttons, actually these three buttons, are not currently functional, although I have a keyboard encoder that all of these can connect to, so I could make them functional. I just haven't seen a need to yet. So I have these toggle switches that I can wire up to actual functions. And then kind of the neatest part of all of this is the functional game cartridge slot. So I have a real Atari 2600 reactor game here, and then on the side, if you look very closely, it might be kind of hard because it's black on black. Let's see. You can see the slot for the micro SD card here and the SD card here. So inside this cartridge is an SD card reader. And I'll quickly open that up so you can see. So here is the cartridge. I have an SD card reader here. This was just an off-the-shelf pluggable SD card reader that I took apart. I have soldered the wires from the from the USB to the cartridge points here. So you can hear that none of those solder traces are actually buried under lacquer or anything, so it was very easy to solder each of the wires to the traces here. And I have all of these other traces if I want to add in additional functionality as well. And this goes into the cartridge reader. So we have the factory cartridge reader over here, and that in turn is wired to a USB port. So this cartridge is just functioning as a USB pass-through. It's just like a USB port. My SD card full of ROMs here, and I plug this in and it just shows up as an external drive on my computer. It's just pretty cool. And jumping back in, we have the I/O port here. Very simple, just a HDMI here that I use. The Ethernet's nice, but I don't actually need to use it. And then USB ports, simple stuff. I wanted to embed this in there, but as you'll see in a moment, it's extremely tight inside there. So for the present, I just plug this into the back. And it gives me nice speedy Wi-Fi. And that's really it. As you can see from the back, I did add the power plug here because this now has a power brick instead of a onboard power supply. But these sides are all the same. The bottom is the same other than having the I/O bump out here. And you can see the motherboard underneath there. But really, I tried as hard as possible not to impact the image of what it looks like in this console, and especially head-on, there's really no way you could tell that this isn't a normal Atari, other than the USB ports, I suppose. I'm going to quickly undo the screws in the bottom and I will show you around the inside. Okay, and welcome back. I have now removed the screws, and now it is time for the big reveal of the mess that is going on inside this thing. So here it is. So let's just go over some of the pieces of that, see if I can get the light a little bit better. Okay. Here, the RAM sticks. I installed a server cooler that was much lower with the profile. You can see it's just about the same height as the RAM sticks here, so that fit in much nicer. I needed to have a power supply extension, and the power supply is this guy back here. I'll get back into that in a second because that is really the reason for this huge delay in video updates on that. This is the back side of the cartridge reader. So I soldered the pins from the USB port on the other side, and this just goes into the USB header right here on the motherboard. I have the other USB header here. This goes to the front USB ports. I have a case fan right here that is just glued to the top grate. So there are actually fan ports here and here existing in the case already for ventilation. So those actually do a pretty good job, especially with a fan pulling in air and then the CPU fan and then pushing out right here. I haven't noticed any issues with temps when I'm running emulation stuff. So solid state drive back here. It's kind of shoved in there. It's tidy for now. Maybe I'll 3D print something better down the road. This required some custom brackets here for the cartridge in order to hold this in place, because this actually mounted to the motherboard on the Atari, so it was quite a bit of work to get this to mount from the top. I have the Dell speaker over here that just gives me a little case speaker, but it is actually a speaker, it's not just a beeper, so I can hear game audio and stuff. These are the back sides of the switches, so I 3D printed custom brackets for each of these. These are the momentary switches, actually have tabs on them for screw ports, or screws, so I made plastic welded studs for those, rivets, sorry, that are, I used a soldering iron to heat that up and melt the plastic in there, hold those in place. That worked out really well. So I used that on the power button. The power button comes down here, and there's a header down in here. Now, circling back to the power supply here, this is actually the 5th power supply that I tried to get to work with this thing. So Dell has a history of using the ATX power supply connector, but their own custom pinout of it. So when I first bought a small Pico power supply, the type that just have a circuit board directly on top of an ATX connector, I thought that that might be the case for the reason why it wouldn't work. I got an overvoltage error, the power supply was clicking, so it was obviously trying to protect the motherboard. There's a short somewhere. So I go through and I checked the voltages with my multimeter on every single pin coming from the Dell power supply to see if there was anything weird. Nope, it follows the spec. So I thought, okay, I just got a bad Pico power supply, I'll get a new one. Replacement came, it did the exact same thing. Their tech support was really good. I can't fault the company at all. I think that they have a good product, but for whatever reason, those two power supplies would not work with this motherboard. So I went to Best Buy and I just bought an off-the-shelf EVGA big brick power supply just to see if anything else would work. Sure enough, it worked fine. So I knew that maybe it has to be something with those Pico's power supplies. I just don't know what exactly it was. Unfortunately, that chewed through about like 6 weeks of time waiting to ship those back. It's It was really frustrating. So finally I ordered this one here, and this is a small 300 watt power supply. It's very, very small for being 300 watts. Um, and it works great. It worked great the first time. So I have this extension here, and that goes into there. And I will say that this motherboard does not have a unique ATX pin out. It is just a regular one. You should be able to use any ATX power supply with it. For whatever reason, I couldn't. So this little one here I got off Amazon. It's worked out really, really well, and it actually has more power, at least according to the label, than the one that the Dell came with in the first place. So for the integrated stuff that I'm using, I'm not running a graphics card. I only have one device. It's going to be way more than I need. So I don't know, I have overhead room. I've thought about trying to cram a graphics card in here, but it is so tight that I don't think that's ever going to happen. And that's fine because it runs GameCube at full speed without any issues at all. I'm really happy with it. So that is it. That is the Atari 2600 PC build. I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's only a modest PC, but I can run GameCube. I can run Dreamcast, those type of things at 60 FPS, 1080p without any issues at all. So that's exactly what I built this for. I wanted something that was more powerful than a Raspberry Pi, and that's exactly what I've come out with here. I can run pretty much any console up to the early 2000s-ish, till before the Xbox 360, and it just works really, really well, and it looks good doing it. So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon for my channel. Please comment down below what you'd like to see me do next. I have some ideas on what I'd like to do in the future, but I am all ears, and I kind of like seeing where this all takes me. So I'm not very experienced on YouTube, but I had a lot of fun doing this project. I've had a lot of fun documenting this project, and I only do it just to throw some knowledge out there in the world. So if you have any comments or questions, please let me know down in the comments. I'm here for you guys. Thanks. Bye.